great. So, Sandeepan sir, mostly many of the students have already joined, and few are still joining. But then we can start the session. It is already
anytime.
8 o'clock.
Anytime. But do record it so that other students can also see the interaction. And everything is a learning, and you learn best from your peers. So that's something.
Yep, we're recording.
Okay.
So, students, few of you can, like, if you are comfortable, please switch on your cameras. We will start recording this session as well. Sandeepan sir, Antariksh is there, Jeet is there. They have a group. They started that here. Ananya is there. So they are smart local people whom we featured.
Correct. So that's a deck I really got, and I got through it. Yes.
Correct. Then there is
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Kushla is there. He's also working on his idea.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you guys.
So,
Good to see
we
you.
have Aratrika. She was the one who like pinned me at 12 o'clock in the night.
Right. You did tell me about those things, right?
Correct. Antariksh is here. Their group, like Jeet, Antariksh, Ananya,
Excellent.
others, they worked 3 nights at a row without sleeping for their pitch deck. So you can understand the type of enthusiasm that they have been showing.
Yeah, but remember that it's a marathon. You should take care of your health. I mean, it's
Correct.
okay to get into the momentum and do it. We all have done it. I'm not saying we didn't do it, but make sure you're hydrated, make sure you have the right food. It takes a lot to stay in the hunt, and as you go along, you will see that one of the most underrated qualities of good entrepreneurial teams is stamina.
Correct.
Stamina is being able to be productive from here throughout that entire period. It's no fun being a zombie and trying to be productive just by staying up and being obstinate. It's good to have determination, but it's bad to be obstinate about things. All right. So
Yes.
fire away, and we will discuss whatever is needed. And there are no impertinent questions. Any sort of questions are there. And as you know, this format, of course, is tough because, first of all, it's a subject no one can teach. It's something that you experience, and we are setting up the infrastructure for that. But through the course design and the way we will go through it and navigate it, I hope the thing is done. This is the best way to learn. You have an actual problem, you want to be an entrepreneur, and you are taking part in an entrepreneurship program. That way we can be much more effectively productive about giving feedback to you on that. That will be great. So some decorum we need to follow, probably what anyone can do, fastest fingers fast we can do. Whoever wants to ask a question can just say me, and in that order of the chat, we can go with that. Okay, you didn't wait for it, but okay, we'll give it to you. So Ananda, start off. No problem.
Sir, I wanted to ask, we have many ideas going on through the day-to-day life. We get many ideas. How to evaluate these ideas, that which one we should keep or which one we should work on and which one we should not work on? How to evaluate, as you are the founder of so many business ventures and everything.
Right.
That's why I wanted your opinion about it.
So see, I'm a greedy person. So my way of approach is that I usually go for a sector. And I know that one of the days I will probably end up having one solution, which is one venture, which is solving all those problems as long as they're connected. Now, if you are thinking of 3D printing and pet grooming, of course, you can't club them. But if you're thinking of pet foods and pet grooming and pet spa and vacations with pets, then they can come under a brand. So first of all, is it segmentation to make sure of that. So there are many ways to approach it, and there is no silver bullet for these things. There are always right ways. But I believe in the market a lot. So whatever makes me feel that I can go to the market fastest and get feedback so that I don't go astray in my own mind's imagination and go into wrong things, I try to go to the market first and try to learn from the market and fine-tune the product. So whatever is an express need is there. But before that, there are some sanity checks. One is that, is it a product where you can empathize in that case, you can be a customer. So I don't always agree with the principle that in your product, you cannot be the customer. You can be the best customer if you really know that the target audience is large enough who are like you, and you empathize with the entire audience that you're trying to serve. Then you build a product for itself, but you have to work in a balance of contradictions. That is it enough for me to get value immediately? So moment you hit that mental note that whatever I have now is still an improvement for the person's or my target audience's life, and there should be a value in it, it's important to go and validate that in the market to see that someone is willing to pay you money for it, because innovation is costly. You may decide, see, one thing I want to make clear, that there is no option but to make profits when you are in the business. How you use your profits is your ethics. You can put all of your profits in R&D. There's a famous company, again, done by a person from our part of the world in Roots, Bose. Bose speakers, the guy is actually from Chandanagar, right? Some place from Meghdud and all come from. Now for 25 years, they only reinvested back every penny, every cent, whatever, every paisa, whatever you call it, of their profits into R&D. And they probably transcended an R&D gap of 100 years and condensed it in 25 years. That was their motivation. But that doesn't mean a Bose is cheaply priced. And people are not. They wanted to make sure that they make such a product that people are willing to pay a premium. I think that's perfectly justified. So that is what I would start with. Now, the second benefit of that is, imagine you have got a cash cow. You've got your things working, correct? Then you can go and experiment with many other things you want to build without having the doubt whether it will work, not work. The third aspect, which is very important, is even among all these cash generative businesses, if you can come up with a model, which as we go along we'll explain better, is called, let's say, negative working capital, where people pay a subscription ahead and you can do demand forecasting, and that part is there with the full confidence that you will give them money if they're not satisfied. You should have that confidence in your product. That's the best one, because your customers, become your first funders. So there's a plethora of choices to do. At the same time, if you're doing deep tech, then you should have enough conviction and enough gunpowder in your treasury to make sure that you are able to put the right time for doing it. So there is no right answer to your question. That's what I wanted to give by the examples, because each case would determine what is the perfect way. But go to market at the earliest and try to validate the product. That mantra will remain consistent irrespective of what category you're going for.
Thank you, sir. I really got enlightened by what you spoke.
Did that answer your question? You may get enlightened and
Yes.
become Buddha, but does it
Yes,
solve
sir.
it?
It sure did.
Okay, good. Excellent. Next, who goes?
So me.
How do you know that? Okay, fine, go ahead. All right. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Shalini, is it possible for you to switch on your camera so that?
Sir, I am actually on my way, so you won't really be able to. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
No issues. No. See, you must realize that the surrogate body languages, faces do matter, especially for your peer groups and all. And peer learning is the biggest form of learning. Anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely, sir.
Sure.
Sir, you mentioned this one statement while you were answering her question, that we can be our own customers, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little deeper into the statement? Like, I really wanted to know what made you say that.
So, for example, we were educated, so suitably so. We were supposed to be the fresh bus, but when we actually went out, we realized we don't know nothing about equity. And I'm talking of 96. I had all the degrees possible, which should make me a possible thing. And then I realized that the intuitive knowledge and information-based system doesn't exist. And I needed it and I couldn't find it anywhere. That became my inspiration for starting Money Control. And the whole idea of Money Control was, how do I create finance in rhymes and proses? So it's simple and anyone can get it. And it doesn't look like rocket science or like Reis Jua Satta Bajar. It doesn't feel like that. So that was my motivation, right? Similarly, in Just Dial, I wanted to make sure I don't have to rely on my Mossy or the next door neighbor to find out where the plumber is. So there are cases where I can be the customer because I empathize with the end user.
So, sir, can you hear me?
Sorry? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. I was saying, okay. So, you made a solution for the problem you were facing. That
Yes.
made you say that?
At the same time,
okay.
there were other problems where I was not the target user. For example, when we created Mihoop, which is one of our things, it was for making illiterate people interact with computers through speech only.
Okay.
And it takes in accents and all. I was not the target audience for it. There I had to do a lot of user research and do it, right? But I can tell you the kind of madness you should do to get to know your user. We made a solution called Fortigo. It's now merged into one of those large logistic companies. And the whole idea was to make the finance part of logistics for the truckwalas very easy. To get the actual user perspective, I actually worked as a helper to a truck driver 14 days. Just to know what is the route he takes, what's his daily day, where does he face problem, what is the actual problem he faces.
That's insane. At the same time,
So that's not
Yeah.
insane. That's not insane.
I mean-
That is what it takes. Now, if you people are under the impression you can just do thought experiments and be doing, you may succeed. You may be geniuses, but the probability of it increases the more you actually do experiential learning. For the 10 years that I was in Just Dial, I made sure that every 6 weeks, I took calls personally on the calls that you do for one whole day.
So
I cannot exemplify that, what it does, but it does trigger your intuition. Every intonation, every frustration, every extra breath, which you cannot put into a calibrated, report, does matter when you are getting inspired for a solution.
I mean, that is the differentiating factor. I feel that, knowing the ground reality of it, like you experienced,
I think it's very,
at least try.
I cannot comment on whether that's the only way. All I can say is you should cut your coat according to your cloth. And your cloth is your own internal knowledge of how much or how less you are yourself. Some people are very intuitive. I have colleagues who in certain flanks could completely outthink even without the incidents happening and anticipate things. There are certain areas where I can do the same, but where I cannot, I have to be humble and go ahead and collect data. And that's where my training is as a statistician. So I have a bias towards data collection. So I think my training also plays a part in why I am overzealous about going ahead and collecting data in that way. So we are, 1,001 events through our childhood till our parts, and every day makes us who we are. It's very important to understand who you are and then fix your strategy. Do not copy anyone's strategy. It's important to not only know what they did, but it's very important, actually more important to know why they did it. So when you know, and when I tell my answers, please be biased. Please be understanding. I'm not saying please be biased. Please be understanding that I may be biased because of the construct I was born in and the construct I made in. When we were starting, we didn't have this entire ecosystem. Funding was unknown. We had to start a business which had to be profitable from day one. We were not from rich parents either. So that has changed. And I'm not saying you should carry our baggage. So it's very important to know the context of the answer. So do not take any answer ever without understanding the context. That's what I'll tell you as an answer.
So I really do believe in that too. So thank you for that answer. So that was really enlightening. Thank you.
Welcome. Next. Yes, go ahead.
Sir, basically, how we should validate that whatever idea we have is fit for market or not?
So I may be jumping the gun. There are certain lectures that we have covered, probably in episode 5 or 6. I don't know how they're fragmenting those lectures. I've already recorded close to 17, 18 odd topics, right? So they are all in the coming. They are releasing it like a Netflix episode, which is fine. So that will be covered. But Everything else is there. You always have the Excel sheets, you always have the data. There's a primary research, secondary research. I've explained all those things. But never undermine the impact of your intuition. And when I say that, I want to qualify it and come from my instance of what I mean by intuition. And in my mind, the best definition of intuition was given by Isaac Asimov, wherein a robot tries to define what an intuition is. And it's very, very dry and very objective. So according to that, an intuition is the ability to come to correct conclusion from incomplete data. So that doesn't mean that you will get it without, you need to have data, but it can be incomplete. Your mind can do a little bit of space filling curves and fill in some data. And that is your X factor. Imagine game theoretically. The analyses and paralyses you can do are limited. Every management book covers about it, right? So what you can do, let's say Devajyoti here or Jeet here can do exactly the same if they're equally exposed, and since you're in the same course, you will have equal exposure. So what sets you people apart? One is, of course, your diligence. The other, more important, is your intuition. But whenever you get an intuitive break, never ever forget to backtrack it and get a logical conclusion to why that intuition came to. There's always that. Unless both of these are working, do not make a selection. Gather more data. That remains constant, no matter what stage you do. No, there is primary data, secondary data, your conclusion, your logical inclusion, all those things. This basic principle will never be violated. That's my understanding.
So thank you, sir.
Next. And guys, I don't believe, see, I've never been a career teacher, professor, whatever you call. I'm a very hands-on, industrial, industrious also person. I like open communication. I'm not saying there should be a complete yari dosti kind of a conversation. That's not the decorum. But it should be free. And you can drop the sirs, you can drop the formalities and stick to questions. And the more intense and the more high-spirited and the more passionate questions we ask, the better the whole group will learn. Okay? And there is no one truth which is absolute in business. Nothing is ever like that. So absolutely fine. I would love to debate with you guys. I would love you to counteract and say that what you said is bullshit. I have this opinion on that point. I mean, do it with decorum, do it with normal thing. You don't have to be brass to make a debating point. When I said that it was an extreme example, I'm not saying you should call me names, but I do want that passion. I do want that intensity. And I do want that cerebral exchange, which would really make it important. Okay, I'm also learning. My reason for doing this course, despite everything else that I'm busy with, is I really think that your Gen Z, Gen Y, whatever you call yourself, you are a very, very, very potent lot. And there's a lot to learn from you. And the future is in your hands. We are getting into the age when we need to be exploiters of your talent. So I'm getting ready and priming myself for that.
Antariksh, Jeet, Ananya,
Anyone, feel free.
Ayush, please feel free to ask question because I saw a list of questions you were
So
having.
may I?
Go
May I
ahead.
have one more?
So I
Gaurav is
think,
also here.
Ananda, you will do it, but I saw Devajyoti raise his hand. So next question goes to Devajyoti after Ananda is finished. Just keep that order in mind. Gaurav also has
Good evening,
raised.
sir.
Yeah, Ananda, can we take Ananda's first? Because Gaurav, Devajyoti, you go ahead and then we'll come back to Ananda. Okay.
Okay, sure, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. So, sir, my question is this: how do you identify potential market risks that could affect your business growth? Like it's like just come in my mind.
Yeah, that's very important. So that's what we call outflanked. It's like football, right? You are putting all your manpower to the guy who has a ball, and then suddenly the ball gets passed to a flank that you are not protected, and you get outflanked, right? And if you are not wise enough to set an offside trap, the guy will actually go on to score a goal because he is not marked. That often happens. I'll give a classic case which you have all gone through but may not have realized. A lot of fintechs came and they essentially created mobile wallets and all, right? And then government of India came with Bhim, UPI, and all of those wallets vanished. They're vestigial parts now, correct? So you can always get outflanked for several reasons. Now, this is something I've also covered in one of the classes. I don't know which one of them. You must remember one thing. No one wants a drilling machine. They want a 1-inch hole in the wall. Now, that is, you have a precedence of drilling machine, thinking of a better drilling machine. But what if someone who is coming from optometry, cutting machine which is soundless and has no risks, people will switch to that. So when you're making a solution, I suddenly saw a lot of people go off. Is my connection unstable? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So remember that, first of all, it may come from an unknown quarter, but it may come from an unknown agent which is doing there. Like if I were doing a fintech, and that's the reason I'm done. For example, I as a person, as an entrepreneur, we work with a lot of startups, have never taken interest in any startup which is into cryptocurrency. I don't believe cryptocurrency is very going to be there because it changes the world economics completely. I do believe in central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. That's my call because of the risks I see of being outflanked if I go on a charter which doesn't have any legal tenement. Now, this is where many entrepreneurs do it. And by the way, it's important to do with a known amount of it. I'm not saying don't take the risk. You people often, and when I say you, I mean young people like you, often undervalue the impact of law. That is where most of you get completely outflanked. That's one important thing to do. Second is you get so efficiency oriented that you forget that there could be some other charter coming and completely changing everything. These two things you need to be cautious about. Now, you can never get to 90, 100% confidence, but like they say, nothing is impossible. You have to choose what are the improbable things. But for that, you need to stop bucketing things in zeros and ones. You need to think of everything as a probability and give it an occurrence. Moment you change that way of thinking, non-zero one to some probability, to calculate the probability, you'll do more research. As you do more research, you'll be more aware of the risks. That's the best way to sanitize yourself.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anywhere where the question is going like a bouncer, please ask, because sometimes I get too jargony. It's my sadly, because I work with a lot of people where jargon dropping is important. Whenever things are not simple enough, some things are not clear enough, please do raise the question. I may not answer it. I may take it offline with you, take it some other part, or say come back in the honor of time and other people. But I will get back, and I want to make sure that whenever we discuss something, it's abundantly clear. You may agree to disagree with me on the point of view, but it should be clear. Clarity and transparency is most important. Okay.
Aratrika,
I think a lot of people have. Let me open
Others
the
I
sheet.
want.
Yeah, please go ahead. Aratrika is next. Correct.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
So you're also traveling now, Aratrika? You had sent a message, right?
No, sir, I'm not traveling, but I've joined from a different laptop and it doesn't have a webcam.
No issues. No issues. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
So I'll tell you something. I'm not a career professor, so when I look at the postures and the body language of the person I'm answering to, that tells me a lot of cues, and I know where to elongate and where to cut short. So that's a cue. That's the reason I always look for faces. No other reason. That's all. Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Sir, actually, I have two main questions right now.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is like just getting the business idea isn't exactly like it might be halfway there, but there are still about 1 million steps to go through, right?
Absolutely. Ideas are probably See, ideas are like the seeds. Without that, the tree can't come. But that doesn't mean every seed will grow into a tree. So it's a qualifying criteria, but not at all an assurance. In fact, execution is everything. The soil, the nourishment, the sunlight, that's what makes a seed grow, not the seed by itself.
Yes, exactly. That is actually what my question is. Like, exactly what are the steps, or how would I know if I'm taking the right step? Or
Okay, again, I may be jumping the gun. Probably some of it will be covered in the lectures taken before. That's the reason, Rohini, I thought probably it's better to publish all the lectures, but it's fine. So see, there are about 7, 8, 9 steps depending on what you're doing. But the immediate first step of getting an idea is to making sure you do some sort of a research and market validation to find out if the idea has legs, if it will yield money, if it can be done. You may think of an idea which, even if you logically thought is possible, may not actually be feasible. Or it may take a different route and it may take something or some technology is not there, which is an ingredient to your part. So the feasibility study from both the market side as well as from the execution side is very important. Second thing, and remember that I like to say that there are 5 questions that you should always answer to yourself. The 2 questions are same, the capitalization is different. The first question is, why are we doing it? With the why in capital. The next question is the same. Why are we doing it? With the we in capital. That means, am I the right person to do it? Just because I have the right idea, I may not be the right person to do it still. I may not have the skills on that part. In that case, if I'm not the right person, do I need to extend? So this is exactly where you will know whether you need co-founders, whether you need other support. With the co-founder in place, are you going to be significant enough to call it your own startup, or are you better off in joining somewhere where you wish? That's a very heartfelt thing. I have been on both sides of the table. Sometimes when the cause was greater, I didn't mind just being an employee, a significant one that also, because I could contribute. I knew I was not the prime driver. So that understanding of yourself and your limitations and strengths is very important, and that's the next step. Forget everything else. Forget funding and all. Those come much later. First, understanding whether your heart is in it. And that has 3, 4 aspects. One is, are you the fit person? The next thing I ask, and that's my bias, is, why am I doing it? That's a third question. So that has the answer, how long do I want to do it for? An immediate question is, do I have the stamina and the interest in this subject that I will be with it till it concludes with a failure or success? Or I give it 7 years, I give it 5 years. Moment you start thinking about your fitment, you will see that filters out a lot of ideas that you get as infeasible. Now that you have gone over yourself, then comes external validation. Will it make money? Are there people interested enough and all? But first, be clear about yourself. I always joke that there are these 2 kinds of entrepreneurs these days, or there are 3 kinds of, but let's take the 2 extremes. One I call as the fashionpreneurs. They think it's fashionable to be an entrepreneur, so they become entrepreneurs. They want to see a CEO, they want to have visiting cards. And then there are the passionpreneurs, who don't even have a designation, but they would die to make the solution and don't really care if they are not the CEO, if someone else is there, because they are dying to see the idea. And in between lies a lot of great successful entrepreneurs. The most successful ones are neither of the extremes, but they have the right ratio between these 2 things, depending on what that particular sector needs. Suppose you are not a communicative entrepreneur, you don't like talking, and you're in a sector, let's say media. Now you are made a truth factor determination technology which tells and spots fake news, but you are very shy and you don't want to talk, and you don't want to go with the co-founder because that's not your new DNA. Will you be successful? Very low chance. Because one of the reasons why a media company will succeed is because the entrepreneur can talk about it and convince people it's important. So that understanding, that intuition play is very important to know what is going to be feasible or not. No one knows the success. No, it's not a formula. If it was a formula, everyone would be equally successful or equally failure. The X factor comes from your faith in yourself. that you can see it through and you are able to see something no one else is able to do it. So even if the whole world is against you, you have the conviction to go with it. And even if the world says it's going to be fabulous, do it, and you don't have the real calling from inside, it may still fail. Look around you, look at all the success stories. Everyone says when they raise funds, they try to hide when they shut down. And the ones that have to force it because employees go and complain, look at where they took the company. And finally, when you draw down and go down, two reasons come up: co-founder dissonance and lack of conviction of the entrepreneur in the business. Funding and all I have never seen to be a reason really significant. These are always the two main reasons. Everyone can say funding नहीं मिला इसलिए बंद कर दिया, क्यों टाका देना ना कोलकाता कंपनी बोले ताई उन्हें बंद कर दिया. But there are so many contradictions to say that that's quite hogwash. It's not true. If you have conviction, it will happen. You will make it happen. So first of all and foremost, and the only thing in my mind is, are you convinced it's going to work? That's all the feasibility matrix that matters. Does it answer your question, Arutrika?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
I have so many raised hands. That is such a...
Has it demotivated you? Because I spoke very harsh truths.
No, sir, not at all. It's actually better to hear the harsh truths now.
I thought you were expecting a formula and I would write down and then you will solve it, and no, it's not that. It's a lot of it is about yourself. You know, everyone talks of the success, no one knows the failures. I can tell you that I have surely failed way more than I have succeeded. But I also know I would not have succeeded had I not failed. So, if you are a really startup person, if you're really passionate, you have only one mantra. You either learn or you succeed. You never fail. That is what... Now, you will be willing to fail only when you are passionate. Otherwise, you will never will fail. You cannot take the risk psychologically unless you're passionate. So many of you, when you had those heydays or you wanted to write poems, let's say, and you didn't care if you fail as long as you could write it to prove to yourself, right? Entrepreneurship is no different. It's a creative outlet.
I see 9 raised hands, Sandeepanji.
We'll go in the order. That's what the first to last is there, right? So I think Jagrit is next. That's what I see on my screen.
Yes, even I see Jagrit.
Go on, Jagrit.
Sir, am I audible?
Very feebly. I can hear you saying I am audible almost like you are speaking from the next galaxy.
Sorry, sir.
You can type the question also if your audio thing is swinging. So I'm fine. I'll read the question to everyone and then answer you.
Okay, sir. I will type it.
I can hear you now. You can go ahead.
Okay, sir. Sir, I saw a video where Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, mentioned that timing is crucial for startup success. Could you please explain how timing impacts the startup, especially when launching a product?
I would love to.
How can I ensure that I am entering the market at the right time?
You can never ensure that, but you can always ensure that you are entering at what you think is the right time. Everyone thinks they're entering the market at the right time, right? Now, that is often not the problem. The bigger problem, and there is a problem. I'll give an example. For example, these are called moonshot projects. There are startups who are building spaceships which can go and mine asteroids, right? Now, either they have deep pockets and they know that they can sustain themselves for 12, 15 years. But in my mind, I don't think it's going to happen feasibly with all the technologies in place. A lot of laws need to be in place. Who owns that asteroid? Who can claim it? Is it finders keepers, or do you have to come and give a tax? Which country do you give a tax? So when they actually go to roll out, there will be a lot of problems which you have not thought of. So thinking that it will get sorted and they will be able to be successful in 25 years is there. Often, I'll tell you one of the best lessons I had learned from a very young guy. And this was a guy who had given Souk a run for its money in Middle East. And he had come for a very different problem. He had come for, a robotic sorting algorithm that I had some work done in the past in papers and all. He had somehow wanted to catch up with me. So I took him for lunch and I asked him, "Kaise kiya?" He said, "Sir, बहुत simple था. हम बहुत R&D किया." And he had a twinkle in his eyes. I said, "R&D matlab?" He said, "Replicate and duplicate." And he said that I did it for 2 years. I found out features in my competitors which I marked out as ahead of its time by looking at it and seeing that no one used it in 18 months. And I found a pattern in that where those sort of features no one uses. It's just done for technology's delight. So I said, and he said, then I said, "Why didn't you do user survey?" He said, "User survey is not a problem, sir. Whenever you ask someone a question, they feel it's obligatory to prove their IQ, then actually solve the problem. So they are answering to impress you and not
Your voice is breaking, Sandeepanji.
and ask people to shop. Is it better now?
It is, but we missed 2-3 sentences.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I'll repeat. So he said that R&D matlab replicate and duplicate. You got that. So he said finally that, "How did you do it? I didn't do user service. How did you do it?" I paid 100 dirhams to our target person and asked him to shop on my competitors' products. And I saw what product he uses, what product he doesn't use, and what is the problem. I asked him after that. And he said, "Sir, the solution was hand sorted by Lakshmi." What is that? That when they were buying potatoes and onions, which they were mostly in the green grocery and all, they had no control on the size. So if you're a cook, you will know that if you try to cook a big aloo and a small aloo together, the boiling levels will be different. And that has a problem in cooking. So he simply sorted it out by saying small, medium, large. And that is hand sorted by Lakshmi. That was his things. Now he was not ahead of time. The others were ahead of that time. And he proved that. Correct? Classic example of ahead of time. Online payment 20 years ago. Credit card payments 15 years ago. In fact, till UPI was enabled, online payment, right? This is one being ahead of its time. Another thing ahead of its time, cash on delivery. That's not ahead of its time, that's very much in time. Because in India, our fear psychosis, because of our legal structure is, till I have paid, the guy will run after me. When I have paid, I have to run after him, and there's no legal recourse. So when you are starting off and you are doing something like payment on delivery, be ready to have 60% rejection and return rates. And your business often can't sustain it. That's how the biggies with big pockets outdo you. Even if you have a better product, they just have more money to completely wash you out. Look at the ones who are successful. They never allow that. They allow for returns policy after failure, even if they get a lot of Twitter bashing. They don't care. They know their model depends on that. Right? So ahead of time has a lot of connotations.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the answer.
There are more examples. I thought I'm taking more examples. Especially in deep tech, there is a lot of these things. Like AI has been there for 60 years. It's only now it's not ahead of its time because compute is cheap. When I was studying, I went to study in a college called ISI because it had a supercomputer, one of the very few which was used for students. In 91, that was like a great ruling factor. That had 4 GB of RAM and used to occupy 7,200 square foot, which was always AC. My phone today has 4 times the capacity. Now, if I was building an image processing application for end users in that time, I would have been ahead of its time. Just because I can do it doesn't mean it will be used. That's also ahead of its time.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the answer.
Perfect.
Enlightened me.
Next.